Hi, this is Glenn Loury. I want you guys to know that The Glenn Show is moving to its own YouTube channel. If you don't want to miss new episodes, then I'd encourage you, please follow the link in the description and subscribe to The Glenn Show at the new YouTube channel. You can also help us out and help the channel grow by commenting and by hitting the like button, the YouTube algorithm. So that's the announcement. Stay tuned. There's much more to come. Thanks.
It's like somebody goes ballistic in a supermarket over wearing a mask, and it circulates in progressive social media as if this person is typical. Well, no. If this person were typical, this wouldn't be circulating. It wouldn't be news. It's because almost nobody who voted for Trump does this that it's a big deal, and quit acting like it's typical. So, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and by both sides. I'm focusing on my own side because that's the problematic psychology I see firsthand in a way. But I think there's work to be done on both sides, and I think psychology is teaching us more and more about the cognitive biases that fuel tribalism. And of course, look, disagreement and even conflict between competing ideologies can be perfectly natural and healthy. They have, there are things that get hashed out, but the kind of irrational part of it that just sends it into overdrive and keeps us from solving any issues collectively is the part that I think we understand better and better. And it's a matter of finding a way to make people care about trying to make a difference where they are, right? Like thinking of themselves as when they go on social media, I can make a difference, however small. I can contribute to a larger cause here by trying to not mindlessly retweet things just because they seem to confirm my side of the argument, and not dismiss every piece of evidence that inconveniently doesn't fit in with my argument, and not ridicule people who disagree with me, and not pretend that extremists on the other side are typical, and so on. I mean, it's a...
Now, I would have thought, Bob, that the place where the rubber would meet the road on this agenda that you just sketched would be in primary and secondary education, where you're teaching civics to kids and you're trying to get them to emerge into adulthood with more cognitive empathy and humility and a kind of self-awareness of the pitfalls of tribalism and all of that. And sorry, but the last time I checked, and I don't care which side of the critical race theory debate you take, nobody was interested in that agenda. The agenda of teaching our kids to be open-minded, to not project stereotypes onto people with whom they might have disagreements, to not demonize the other side, to be capacious in their sources of information and not, herd into their little enclaves. To be generous to those whom they encounter in social media and elsewhere with whom they disagree, to listen. Do we teach listen? I'm this off the top of my head. I don't have a whole curriculum here, but it seems to me one could easily develop a pedagogy around your ideas. And I don't think it's happening.
It's probably not. I mean, I'm not super in touch with what's happening in the schools. And again, it's a case where you tend to hear about the worst cases, right? And so I don't pretend to, to be, if you're plugged into one kind of social media echo chamber, you'd think that it's critical race theory 24/7 in all schools. If you're plugged into another echo chamber, you'd think it's nothing of the kind, and there's no problem with the way we're teaching about race. Yeah. Right, nothing to see here. I assume the truth is somewhere in between. But I certainly agree that, I assume that one thing you're concerned about, and that I am concerned about if it's happening, is that in a way they're teaching these things, but asymmetrically. In other words, they're warning about stereotyping and various things, except acting as if it only happens in one racial direction, so to speak, right? Like there's no such thing as unfairly stereotyping a white person. I'm not saying that is what they're teaching, but it would be problematic if they are. If only because of the the whole. It's like the whole privilege thing is, it's problematic. There is white privilege, but there are also a lot of white people who, if you tell them they're privileged because they're white, they're like, let me show you my life, right? It's like, maybe I have benefited from my race in ways I didn't understand or did. But right now, my son can't find a job and I've got some disease or something. There are, most people, life is hard for pretty much everyone. And if you tell people that because of the, you can tell by looking at the color of their skin that life isn't hard for them. And I know that's not quite literally the message, but if they can reasonably think that's what you're saying, you're just not going to get any pickup on whatever else you're saying. It's just not a way to reach them. And
particularly if you're one of the more privileged people in the polity who happens to be of color, but you'll be the one who would be doing the telling.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a piece for the Non-Zero newsletter after the George Floyd killing, and I felt I had to be really delicate about it.
Sure.
Because for one thing, I am the least woke member of my family. I mean, my immediate family, like wife and daughters, leaving aside those siblings who voted for Trump. And but I said, I mean, this is a roundabout way to get back to what you're saying, but what I said was, look, what the cop did is definitely something that we have to, shouldn't happen, should be punished, and so on. But there's another problem here, is that if you look at George Floyd's life, and if by virtue of the circumstances of his birth, the neighborhood he was born into, and whatever other factors, including white racism, whatever, if by the virtue of the circumstances of his birth, he was much more likely than some other Americans, including lots of white ones, to wind up in the situation he was in, which is to say, trying to pass off apparently counterfeit money, and having taken some drugs that were dangerous in and of their own right, and having a criminal record and all that. We should look at that too. We should talk about that. In addition to all forms of police misconduct, which we should also talk about. But, it was hard to get that. It was hard to say that without getting shouted down. And I agree with you that if you look at the people who would have shouted you down of all colors, they tended to be people who seemed to be doing okay, much better than George Floyd. Now it's true that I'm saying they're the people who would prominently shout you down. They're the people who I would see on Twitter with lots of followers or on cable TV. But and I don't doubt that they would have support from less prominent, less people who have more to complain about. But I think we have to be careful if we want to address problems afflicting racial minorities, to make sure we're not doing things that help primarily the most vocal elite members of those minorities. And
while alienating many who are not in that minority, but who otherwise might be sympathetic to the general human claims that you want to make on behalf of disadvantaged people. Yeah.
I mean, I think you and I reacted more or less the same way to the phrase defund the police. First of all, the people who advocate that they don't, most of them will tell you,
Yeah, they don't mean it literally.
They don't mean they mean redirect police and so on. But
right.
I think one thing you and I did is recognize immediately that is one loser of a political slogan, man. For whether you talk about most blacks or most whites or whatever, do not go around saying that if you want to win an election.
Yeah.
And yet, appreciable numbers of people said it.
Yeah, most of whom, like you and I, have chosen to live in such a way that the depredations associated with criminal activity do not come readily to our doorstep, and hence we don't have the need for the security that police might provide.
Yeah, I don't feel very threatened on a day-to-day basis, and some people have much more reason to, and I mean, I'm grateful for the police, but some people have a much more immediate need to feel that way.